On the bookshelf of the world's best in children's literature, a special place should be reserved for the works of Meindert DeJong. Not only has this Dutch-American author written such beautiful and profoundly insightful stories as The Wheel on the School and The House of 60 Fathers, but he has won every major award for writing children's and juvenile literature offered in the United States during his lifetime, except one, and was the first American to win the International Hans Christian Andersen Award. DeJong began his life in 1906 in the Netherlands, which is also known as Holland. He was the fourth of 6 sons, 4 of whom survived to adulthood. His father Remmeren was a carpenter, mason, and builder and passed those skills along to his sons. Here on the left we have a map of Europe, and we see that the Netherlands are nestled right here between Belgium and Germany. And on the right is a closer picture of what that coastline there looks like. This is where Meindert, who was known as Mick to friends and family, spent his first 8 years, and where he learned to read from the family Bible while sitting on his grandpa's lap. Zooming up a little bit here, we can find his hometown of Verum, right there on the coast of the Netherlands. Verum was a little village along the dike, just like the one in his story, The Wheel on the School. Most of its inhabitants were either fisherfolk or farmers, and you'll see that influence in the books he went on to write. Now, Netherlands literally means lower countries. And that means that most of the country, or at least half of the country, is below sea level. So you can imagine what happens when a storm comes in and the waves get higher. If the dike, or earthen wall along the coast, isn't high enough, the ocean's going to come right over the dike and flood the town. And that is exactly what happened on the day that Meindert DeJong was born. A mighty flood like this one hit the town and the sea spilled over the dike, and his father took his 2 older brothers out to look at the damage to see what the storm had done. And that's where he told them that a new little brother had been born, and that their mother and the new baby were safe in an upstairs attic. The house had flooded and the seawater was covering the floor below them, but they were safe. Well, later, when Meindert was about 8, his family immigrated to Grand Rapids, Michigan. They were poor, and the other kids at school bullied him, as kids will do when someone's different. Looks differently, speaks differently, doesn't have a lot of money. But you know what? Nothing bad lasts forever, and he made it through. He even went on to earn a college degree from Calvin College there in Michigan. But still, in spite of that college degree, things were hard. This was a time known as the Great Depression, when the economy in the United States was really bad. A lot of people were out of work and needed to find odd jobs and were doing whatever they could to get by. So Meindert worked as a college professor, but he also used the skills his father had passed along to him. He was a grave digger, a mason, a tinsmith, and even worked for a while as a sexton in a church, which is basically a church janitor. By 1938, Meindert was 32 years old and married, and he and his wife were living in the upstairs room of his parents' house. He was raising chickens and selling eggs in order to help out with the family expenses, and one of his stops for selling eggs was the children's room of the Grand Rapids Public Library. It's not clear if he was selling eggs to the readers, the parents, or the librarians, or all three, but the bottom line is that he ended up telling stories to the kids there in the children's room. And eventually, the head librarian encouraged him to write down the stories he was telling. And one of them involved a goose and a duck, this one right here. He wrote it in 3 weeks and submitted it to the leading publisher in the country, Harper & Row. And the book was accepted, and it did very well. And pretty soon the publisher was asking for another story. And since the first one had been about an event on that farm where he lived with his parents, he set this book, Dirk's Dog Bello, in his native hometown in the Netherlands. But World War II soon interrupted this budding writing career of his, and he was sent to serve in Southeast Asia with the U.S. Army Air Corps. And this was a tough time for Meindert DeJong. He had been raised in a gentle, God-fearing home and was serving with a rough group of people, and it was not easy. But he stayed strong. He used his imagination to get by, and it wasn't long before he wrote to his brother about the idea he had for another book. This book would be about a Chinese war refugee and his pet pig, who are befriended by American airmen. It's a story inspired by a young Chinese war orphan that he really had wanted to adopt while he was serving in China. The communist regime had made that adoption impossible, but he turned this experience into a story, which was at first considered to be too dark or maybe too serious for children. Once it was finally published, however, it was given a Newbery honor and has been loved ever since. Now, as you may be able to tell from this picture, Meindert loved animals, especially cats. This is Daphne here watching him type. In fact, a lot of his books focus on animals, not just sentimental animal stories for little kids, but really realistic ones that are concerned with ecology and making the world a better place for all the creatures that live in it. We don't hear a lot about Meindert DeJong now, though he was at one time one of the most popular children's authors in America. He even wrote for children's television during the 50s. By the time he passed away, in 1991 at the age of 85, he had authored 27 books for children, including 5 Newbery Awards. So he's really a very important author, and we think that probably after reading any of his stories, you'd agree that he is uniquely insightful in the way he writes. He seems to really understand the way kids think and feel. So thank you, Meindert DeJong, for teaching us about all kinds of things, from storks and dogs and chickens, to poverty, war, and friendship, and for turning even the difficult parts of your life's journey into beautiful, thoughtful stories for all of us to learn from and enjoy.